So encapsulate, if you can, what window and door suppliers and, I suppose, installers are going to have to do differently that they haven't had to do in the past.
One of the key things for window manufacturers, door manufacturers, is having their products tested and labeled. The new code now requires, because the standard says you have to label your product, you have to have a label of the performance requirements on your product. That's what the building officials are going to be looking for right across the country. It's been enforced in British Columbia that way for a lot of years. Some manufacturers do, some don't. It's an enforcement concern. But as building officials learn that there is a label requirement on the product, they're going to look for the label. And if the label's not there, it could create a situation where the job, you can't get an occupancy permit on a house or a building. That's a big deal. You don't want to be the supplier to the developer on a large job or the builder on a house. You don't want to be the supplier holding up occupancy. It's going to cost you money somewhere along the way. So that's a key and critical concern. Installers, the push now with the A440.4 installation standard, the CSA A440.4 installation standard as a requirement by code, installers are going to have to learn what's required now to properly install the product and get it in there. You know, with everything going on energy efficiency and higher performance on air and water on products, if they're not installed properly, it could all be for naught.
What has to appear on these labels? What are they looking for in these?
They're looking for the performance requirements on the label. So the full requirements out of the NAF standard will tell you the performance rating of the product, but in addition, the Canadian supplement to the standard requires that you show the positive and negative design pressure, the water penetration pressure, and the Canadian air leakage, both for infiltration and exfiltration. All of that's required on the label.
Wow. How much of a challenge do you see it being for fabricators, manufacturers with the present technology? Is it going to be easy to meet those standards? Is it going to be very, very expensive and difficult to meet those standards? Where's the technology in relation to the standards?
In terms of window technology, it's nothing new. The testing that's being done, the requirements that are out there, it's repackaging it in a new format. It should not be difficult. The big change, though, is the new standard requires that you test the largest product you want to put a label on, and therefore sell. If you're code compliant, it has to be labeled, and you cannot put the label on a product bigger than you tested. That's a bit of a change. The old A440 allowed you to go a little bit bigger than you tested, and that was still okay. But in the label itself, the largest size tested is written right on the label. So a building official with a tape measure can check the label. If that window is bigger than the label size says it is, it's not a valid label. So that's also a big change for both window, door, and skylight manufacturers.
And then you're back in that situation of it's you holding up occupancy possibly of
Absolutely.
That. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And now I could see on some of your charts in the presentation, obviously this is not coming in uniformly really across the country. I mean, the national building code is what's changing, and then the provinces will decide on where they want to go.
Structure of code development in Canada, the national code is written as a model code. It has no legal implication anywhere in the country until one of the provinces or territories adopts it. So it's already been adopted in a few regions across the country, and all the others are continuing to look at it. And it will, if you look at the bigger provinces right now, BC, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec are all in a state of transition right now, figuring out when that will come into play. Certainly, I would suspect by the end of 2013 that the new standard will be right across the country, would be my best guess at this time.
Do you see these standards eventually playing into a larger building code standard where the entire house is tested or found to be compliant with some standard of energy efficiency, and these standards have to work within those standards?
There's lots of talk about that. At the national level, there's a whole house energy efficiency standard being worked on. Ontario's already brought requirements in for energy efficiency on the whole house. One of the key things that's being heavily debated in the building code community is whole house air infiltration testing. So what's known as the blower door test. That a blower door test be required before an occupancy permit can be issued. That's a very big deal. Right now in Ontario on the energy efficiency, if you go down one of the performance paths, there are two, if you go down one, it is required to have a blower door test done. Here's the critical and key component. up front, when you do the building modeling on the house, you make an assumption of the air leakage of the whole building. If you test at the end and you don't meet that requirement, you've got a very large problem. So whole house air infiltration testing is a large concern for builders. And key and critical is window and doors themselves, and the installation of those products can be a very, very large component of the leakage of a building.
Wow, that would just be something else. I mean, this idea that you would build a house, and then they're going to put a blower on the door, and then maybe they'll come up with something to do on a window, and if it fails, it goes right back to now you've got the installer, whether it was him, whether it was the product, whether it was, the whole chain goes back to.
And it can be a lot worse than that. Was there in the joint between the roof and the wall systems, is there a leak there? If there is leakage, finding where it is a very big deal at that point in time.
Yeah, and you've got whole houses instead of just one single components being accepted or rejected based on that. Well, it's interesting times for sure. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.